Okay, we just spoke essentially about the mile of mitzvahs maisius. That mitzvahs maisius are mushrish and rosh and ha'elyon, like the mashal of Ratzon, right? The Rebbe says before that mitzvahs maisius had the highest shayrish and Ratzon ha'elyon, and they come down to the lowest level. And through mitzvahs maisius, you mamshech Taineg ha'elyon, right? The Ratzon is the seif of the Ein Sof, and you make all of Vush of Ratzon to be seifel tainu. So we answered really the second part of the questions that we had at the very beginning. In the beginning, he asked us two questions. The second set of questions is, what's the mile of mitzvahs maisis that you have to come and gilgul till you have all the levushim? And now he answered it. And today, Chav Beis is going to go back to the first part, about halachas. Why halachas are the most important part of Torah, and they're called taga, kisra shel Torah, the crown of Torah. So he says, Vine, with Azais it's known, Kihine, Ratzon ha'elyon baruch hu, the will of Hashem, Hamalubish b'tayag mitzvahs, which is manifest in the 630 mitzvahs, or the 630 mitzvahs are the Ratzon that carries the Tainug. Says the Rebbe, however, Shabbatei Shebiksav, the way it is in Teira Shebiksav, Hu mufla u'mechusa tamir v'nelam. It's wondrous and it's covered over, it's hidden and it's concealed and it's hidden. Ve'enim izgal, and it's not revealed by itself. You cannot learn Teira Shebiksav and know how to do mitzvahs practically. In Teira Shebiksav you can see the oid of mitzvahs, the lakus of mitzvahs, but the practical dimension of mitzvahs, Teira Shebiksav almost never provides you sufficient information. Ela b'Teira Shebal Peh, you have to have Teira Shebal Peh. K'mei, for example, and he gives two examples. The first example is probably the best, because tefillin has 10 halacha l'meishim v'sinais. Mitzvahs tefillin, says the Rebbe, al derech mashal, she'nema b'Teira Shebiksav, all it says in the Torah is a kshatam la'is ha'yadacha v'ayu l'tetafes bein yenacha. You should tie it as a sign on your hand, and it should be tetafes, which turns out to mean 4, tat b'kisri shtayim, pat b'afriki shtayim, bein yenacha, between your eyes. Says the Alter Rebbe, u'mayim sasam manela. That statement, it's written in the Chumash 4 times, it's completely obscure, it's totally insufficient, you don't know what to do. Shalai pira shakazu, Torah does not interpret eich, how, uma, and what, liksher, to tie, uma tetafes, and you have to figure out the tetafes means for, the Torah doesn't say so. V'heichen hu bein yenecha, what is between the eyes, v'al yadcha, what is considered on the hand, and it's interpreted in Teira Shebal Peh, which of course, bepashtus, is lower than Teira Shebiksav. And the Alter Rebbe spells it out. You have to tie bayis echad al hayad, one hand, one bayis, one box on the hand, and it means on the kibetis, not on the palm of the hand. Right? Vidal batam al rosh, and 4 boxes on the head, and it means on the forehead, not between the eyes. Ubeteicham dal pashas, and each one of the 2 you have 4 pashas. The 4 places in Chumash where tefillin is mentioned. Va'abatim yiyu ma'ir, the box that's made of leather, mu'ubel, which is worked over, u'merubayim, and square dafke, u'mukusharim b'tzur shal eid, and bound with straps of leather. Shchedes dafke, this will be black, as you know that the blackness of the ritzus is more important than the blackness of the bayis itself. The shchedes of the ritzus is halach l'meishim misina, as opposed to the bayis. V'chol shar protei halachas asiyas tefillin, as well as all the other particular details of the laws of tefillin, shenemru ba'al peh, which were given over by the Chazal, and he adds, v'al yotcha, he has zreya dafke. Yotcha means zreya, the I don't know what this is called, the upper arm, the bicep, and not the hand. V'lei kafiyat, not the hand. Ubein nechazek kotkeda, between your eyes means on the skull, v'lei ametzach, and not on the forehead. So you see many aspects of the inyan of tefillin that the Teira Shebiksav, which reveals the inyan, does not give it halacha, it's not Teira Shebal Peh. V'chein kol mitzvahs Shabbatei, it's true of other mitzvahs in the Teira as well. Bein b'mitzvahs hasei and bein b'mitzvahs leis hasei, both positive as well as negative commandments, that einon gluyes v'yedues and v'rashas are not revealed and known and explicit. Ella al yedei Teira Shebal Peh, only to Teira Shebal Peh. And now it gives you a second example. Kimitzvahs leitaseh, an example from a leitaseh. Tefillin is an essay. Now it gives an example from a leitaseh. Shenema b'Shabbos. It says in the Torah about Shabbos leitaseh malacha. You shouldn't do work. But v'lei pirish mahi malacha. You don't know what malacha means. Uba Teira Shebal Peh in this parish. And the Chazal interpret shein lamatas malachas hayedua. So the 39 prohibited works that are known, right? And v'lei tilkel lavon and v'kedos kevedes, and it does not include moving heavy stones and heavy boulders, even though it's much more exhausting than, for example, flipping on a light or carrying your wallet or finishing a kli, because lamtas malachas are not necessarily determined by how hard it is, but by what Torah defines as work. So you need Torah Sheba'al Peh to interpret Hilchos Shabbos. There's very few. The Gemara says, I actually looked up the Gemara when I was preparing the Tanya. The Gemara, Masechta Chagiga, says there are certain, the Mishnah, there's certain mitzvahs that are explicit in Torah Sheba'al Peh, like Karbonis, like Negoyim, and like Tumis. The Chumash is almost sufficient. But then there are things which are called Harorim Hatluyas B'Sayat, mountains hanging on a thread, on a hair. You have one hair, and the example that he gives is Hilchos Shabbos. And then you have mitzvahs, what Perches Ba'avir Ve'ein L'Mamash Yismecho. They have zero source in Torah Sheba'al Peh at all, and this is, for example, Heta Nedorim. Hataras Nedorim. Hafaras Nedorim is an explicit Parsha Chumash, but Hataras Nedorim is Ein L'Mamash Yismecho. And of course, the Chassidus to this, I'm going to tell you soon, but there's usually Torah Sheba'al Peh is far from sufficient for telling you how to do the halacha practically. Okay, and just like these two, hen kol ha mitzvahs is true of all the mitzvahs. Bein mitzvahs asay, bein mitzvahs laces as both positive and negative mitzvahs that are stumis. They're concealed. V'lei mifarashes v'gluyis v'yaduis. They're not explicit and revealed and known. Elaya de Torah Sheba'al Peh, only with the help of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Now, Chavre, lama macham bekitzer. The difference between Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Sheba'al Peh is Torah Sheba'al Peh is called the ponim, the face of the Torah. Torah Sheba'al Peh is called Acharayim, the back of the Torah. You're going to see it mitzvah and kuntas acharin when we do David Zmiras Kodesh Lahu. The difference is Torah Sheba'al Peh is defined by Ein Sof, by godliness. And the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya Sof Perek Lamed Zayin that Mikra, the word Mikra, which is the word for Chumash, is Kairesh Meiser Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you're learning Chumash, you're calling Hashem's names. So the part of the mitzvahs that you have in the Torah is the godliness, is the Gilui of the mitzvah. But the halachas, the technical aspects of the mitzvah, which on the one hand are the seichel dike interpretation. On the other hand, they're the Ratzon Ha'eliyim, which is higher than the Gilead Elaki. This is Dafkin Dacharayim in Torah Sheba'al Peh. So Torah Sheba'al Peh is much lower than Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh is called Seichel, and Torah Sheba'al Peh is called Olokus. But Dafkin, the Seichel of Torah Sheba'al Peh is revealed the Ratzon Ha'eliyim, which is the practical mitzvah, which you do not have in the Gilead Elaki of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that's the point of this shtickle here. And he continues. That's why it says on Begay Torah Sheba'al Peh, Al Titesh Torah Simecha. Do not forget the Torah of your mother, right? Shma b'ni Musar Avicha, this is Torah Sheba'al Peh. And Al Titesh Torah Simecha means Torah Sheba'al Peh. Let's explain it by giving a physical analogy of a father and a mother. Just as all the limbs of a boy, of a girl, of a child, in fact included in the initial point, in the initial essence, which is the tipas ha'av, the seed of the father. But behelam gadol are extremely concealed. And the mother, of course, develops in the rechem, in the womb, this Pintele, this point, into a complete child, but they does have lot shalim by producing, by giving birth to a complete healthy child. But amach evidim v'shasa gidim with 248 limbs and 365 nerves and veins and arteries and so forth. And what's the nimshal? The nimshal is Torah Sheba'al Peh compared to Torah Sheba'al Peh is like a kernel. Kach amamach, that was also true in the nimshal. Kol ramach mitzvahs, say the 248 positive commandments. Vishin samachay mitzvahs leitas, and the 365 negative commandments, as the Rebbe Boim, they come. May I help them from a hidden state, ella gila to a revealed state, but Torah Sheba'al Peh. In the oral Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is lower than Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's Malchus versus Zoh. But the beginning of the pasuk where it says, Shma b'ni musar avicha, listen, my son, to the rebuke of your father, Koya Torah Sheba'al Peh, go to Torah Sheba'al Peh. What's the connection between Torah Sheba'al Peh and Av? It's very simple. The nafka min chochmah law. Torah Sheba'al Peh comes from chochmah. Hanik b'shem Av. We know that chochmah is Av, and Torah Sheba'al Peh is called Aim because Torah Sheba'al Peh is connected to Bina. So Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is lower than Torah Sheba'al Peh, spells out what's written in Torah Sheba'al Peh in the nucleus of the pintele. So Torah Sheba'al Peh interprets Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is another aspect. And that is, what is Torah Sheba'al Peh interpreting? It's telling you how to do the mitzvahs practically. And what you have to understand about practical mitzvahs is that the shadish of practical mitzvahs is Ratzon, which is higher even than Torah Sheba'al Peh. So it's true Torah Sheba'al Peh is lower than Torah Sheba'al Peh, but it spells out the Ratzon Ha'eliyim, which is even higher than the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Says the Rebbe, and this is the pshat with the pasuk with which this gets the Kaddish started. Eishes Chayla, woman of valor, is a teras baila. She's the crown of her husband. Even though a woman is lower than her husband, she takes her husband's nekuda and makes him a baby. But that's only the process of hishtalshalus. But what she's ultimately revealing is higher than her husband. The oral Torah is called the woman of valor. That gives birth to and erects many forces. Chayos means armies, which goes on the various halachas, as the pasuk says, "V'Allah mesein mispar." And the translation of the word "V'Allah mesein mispar" is in the Chazal Altika. Allah mesel elam is infinite number of worlds, and it says in Chazal elo halachas. The leis lein chushbana. Right? There's so many Tanakh, so many Mishnah, so many Braisa, and Allah mesein mispar. Halachas there's an infinite number of halachas, and that's the inyan of Torah Shabbat. Meshkos b'tikun. Says Rebbe, and here's the key. You should understand that what Torah Shabbat is revealing in halachas is not just revealing the pnimius of Torah Shabbat, but actually v'kulan hein, and all of these are the revelation of the will of the Eibishter, which is hidden in Torah Shabbat. And through the Torah Shabbat having it in a hidden state, Torah Shabbat is able to fully reveal it. If it wouldn't pass with Torah Shabbat, it wouldn't come to Torah Shabbat. But in Torah Shabbat, it's still obscure, and it requires Torah Shabbat to spell it out. It says, when this will, which is going to be fully realized, Dafka in Torah Shabbat, it's higher and even higher than the level of Chochmei. In other words, it's higher even than Torah Shabbat. So it turns out that Torah Shabbat, which is simply a support and an assistant and a helper, Torah Shabbat has a mile over Torah Shabbat because it's revealing the Kesed, which is higher even than Chochmah. Like a crown, which is on top of the mind, which is in the head. And this is what Torah Shabbat does. So the Rebbe concludes, that's why practical laws are called the crown of the Torah. Because though it's lower, its source is higher. If you learn halachas every day, you're for sure going to merit to have elam haba. Because because when you're learning halachas, you're connecting your neshama not with the seichel of the Eibishter, but with the will of the Eibishter, canals we discussed earlier. And somehow being connected to Ratzon Ha'elyon gives you a connection to elam haba. Elam haba the shachas the kesed. You know, it says Hakadosh Baruch Hu manchal chotzadik v'tzadik shay elam is, and kesed is 2 times shy, and so forth and so on. Okay, this against the Kiddush Chavtes. So basically, we learned 2 verter. Yesterday's vart explained the mile of mitzvahs maisius, and today's vart explains the mile of halachas. That's all. Okay.